Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast, and feels good to be back. Was kind of dealing with a little bit with bronchitis there for about a week, and then we had a Christmas party with some friends yesterday, and we figured, obviously, since we have been gone a week, obviously, record on a Thursday. It's obviously not a full show. As you can tell, our full cast of characters. Matty is not here. He has got full parenting duty. But
what up, Daniel?
But yeah, he definitely is. He's gonna be back here, at some point. Yeah, so full parenting duty. What's up, Daniel? Thanks for hopping in. Make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button for MHRT Network over there on YouTube. Follow, obviously, MHRT Network over there on X, of course, Twitter. And you can also follow Brandon and I, of course, over there on the X Twitter platform, that being at Brandon Miller PO and myself at Cameron Parker PO. And have your friends tell their friends about the Manely Broncos podcast. You can, by the way, you can also find us on Facebook, MHRT Network page over there as well. We are also live on Twitch. So if there are anybody that is watching there from Twitch, thank you for watching us.
Twitch chat people are always the real homies. So if you're watching from Twitch,
you're right.
I appreciate you.
It's that up and coming platform in the last handful of years, if you will. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about. We did get a chance to meet last week. Broncos are still on a high, if you will. The Broncos are still a little bit on a high, but it's probably fitting that when we talk about this, we talk about, obviously, the current situation. One of the biggest things I will say that we are going to discuss is, as you can clearly tell in our headline, it says, how did we get here? And so one of the things we're going to be doing here tonight is we are going to be talking about and reflecting on the Denver Broncos season overall. What's been their best and biggest thing, if you will, that has transpired so far this season, not named Bo Nix.
That's a good question.
And then what are like obviously the biggest areas that they need to improve on. So it's gonna be a fun show, and as always, it feels really good to be back. Brandon, how you doing, buddy? Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
I did. I had a good Thanksgiving. It was pretty short. It was small. Is what I was looking for. It was only 4 people. So me, my mom, my stepdad, and my girlfriend. But it was a good time. Definitely prefer the smaller gatherings to the gigantic, huge. I mean, not that I don't love seeing more family, but I just feel like the smaller ones are a bit more cozy and less hectic than like the 12 people sitting around a dinner table and you never know what's going to happen. Thanksgivings, although those are still fun. But it was a good Thanksgiving. Definitely had some actually interesting football games to enjoy this time. Obviously the Lions have some kind of stranglehold on Thanksgiving games where like they pretty much just have some kind of contract where they have to always.
It's almost like their
Thanksgiving.
NFL agreement.
But now that they're good, it's actually enjoyable. And it just blows my mind. I thought about this earlier today, and obviously the Lions game's going on right now as well versus the Packers. But it blows my mind that how well the Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff trade worked for both teams. You almost never see both teams win a trade to that extent. And I honestly kind of feel bad for Matthew Stafford because like he was so underrated for years and he was on that absolutely atrocious Lions team. And I'm like, imagine Matthew Stafford with this Lions team, but Jared Goff is killing it. So they don't need Matthew Stafford, but it just blows my mind that
not to
it worked that well.
Not to do a comparison because obviously it wasn't a trade. But you could almost argue that it was like a win-win scenario for like the Rams and the Lions, right? Well, you look at the Broncos situation, it was a bit win-win also, right? Like you moved on from Russell Wilson. He's balling out in Pittsburgh. Congratulations to him. He's in a really good situation, I feel, down there in Pittsburgh. We'll see if it's a bit of a much longer term. And Bo Nix working out, right? So I mean, it's just like it's been win-win, and it's rare for stuff like that to happen. You know what I mean? Like it's super rare.
Definitely.
Things because it's either one end of the spectrum. You got a team that is either failing or just kind of like in the middle of the road, and then the other flip side of that coin is that they're just failing miserably. Or of course, there's the obvious, and that is just both trades were just just absolutely awful and just could never work out.
Yeah. So that was just interesting retrospective to think back on as we watched the Lions play tonight as well. But other than that, it was a great Thanksgiving. How was yours?
Good. Same thing. Really short in terms of the amount of people. It was just my mom and dad and I. Really nice Thanksgiving. Those are always some of the good Thanksgivings. Obviously, you want to spend it with all the people that you're thankful for, and I joke in the sense that, but it also allows you to have the meals and conversations at the dinner table without having. That
one family member that brings up something political and then just drops a grenade.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it was an absolute blast, and I wouldn't trade stuff like that for the world. Having Thanksgiving with your family, and we certainly hope that all you guys that are watching the Manely Broncos podcast and are fans of the MHRT network, we hope that you guys have had a really good Thanksgiving as well. And being thankful, we are super thankful for you guys as well for enjoying the Manely Broncos podcast. All right, Brandon, let's take a dive into this Bronco game. Certainly,
that was, first of all, let me just throw this question out there before we discuss this. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit, but just to get it out there on air, was that the most entertaining Broncos game since the Super Bowl?
I'm
not going to go that far. But it was up there. I mean, it was certainly one of the most entertaining Monday Night Football games in recent memory.
I feel like there is I don't know how you define it on this, because like I feel like for the Broncos, like that was on an overall game perspective, just game perspective, meaning the other opponent is factored into this as well. I will say yes. I do think that that this particular game was probably the best game that we've seen in the last 8 years. But from a Broncos side of things and how enjoyable that was, I don't know if that was maybe the best Broncos. Because
that's what made me pause, because I'm like, well, it was also made me grow some gray hairs. It made me grow some gray hairs. It was stressful. Yeah. But it was still a good time. Like, between all the interceptions, Cody Barton should have had a pick six. He just couldn't keep up the speed that long.
Right.
Should have had another pick six. So there should have been 3 pick sixes from Jameis.
That
was the most Jameis Winston game I've ever seen.
Yeah. We'll talk about that too.
So we'll talk about that. But I that's kind of what made me pause, is I was like, well, hold on. It wasn't fun in the moment because it was like stressful, but just in terms of like, you get a shootout, we haven't seen. Well, let me just rephrase the question. That was probably the first true shootout that we've seen by the Broncos in years, just years. And I mean, I'm not counting the Falcons game because that was a blowout.
Because that's what you and I said. Like, you and I were kind of in agreement that was like the first shootout, I should say, that the Broncos have had since the Dallas Cowboys and Bronco game, which was the Peyton Manning and Tony Romo game, right?
Probably. Yeah. And that was more than 8 years ago.
Right. So that was what, like 10 years ago?
That was a decade ago.
Yeah. So, but, and so like, I think that's probably the way that you would want to look at it, is like from both team side of things. Like, that was definitely like the best shootout we've seen in 10 years, which we'll obviously talk about that side of the coin. That is also a big Broncos takeaway that is more positive than negative, actually. But from the Broncos side of things and from a Broncos whole, I don't know if that's the best game from the Broncos side, right? Because I feel like, speaking of the Cowboys, you had the Trevor Siemian game against the Cowboys. You had the Teddy Bridgewater game against the Cowboys, where Caden Stearns had the 2 interceptions and and that particular game, and then this last year, or this year I should say, where you had the Broncos' probably most complete game on the year, and that was the Atlanta Falcons game. So, but I think that just from between the opponent side of things, I would venture to agree though that was probably the best overall game that they've had in the last 10 years.
Yeah. So super entertaining. A lot of things to unpack from that game. But it was a wild one. It was a wild one.
I feel like we should start first with the opponent's side of things. You mentioned it. This was very much a Jameis Winston experience. And actually I love Colin Cowherd's description of this. I don't know if you had a chance to hear this. He called it a bachelor party. He's like he's the quarterback that it's a good time. You're enjoying yourself. But he's also the quarterback that, when they always say that, like, who's a quarterback that you would want to build your franchise around? He's the best quarterback that you don't want to build your franchise around.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I would say he's the most entertaining quarterback in the league. And he's certainly proven that he should be a starter. Like, he is a starting quarterback in the NFL. Well, like that's the level that I would personally say that he is at.
Let's ask.
You're getting the Jameis Winston experience.
But let's ask the elephant in the room question: are the Cleveland Browns better, and what would their record be had Jameis Winston started the full year and not Watson? Because I feel like
I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it's going to be better than 3-9. That's all I know.
I do think it would be less than 500, but I
think they would. I think it would be maybe at 500. But
even if it's at 500, there's no doubt in my mind it would be way better than 3-9.
Oh, absolutely. I would say 500 is probably
the ceiling.
A safe bet.
Yeah.
But I mean, it could have gone higher. I mean, when you don't get, here's the thing with Jameis Winston. Like, I say that was the most Jameis Winston game of all time, and that's true. Mm-hmm. But I mean, just about a little bit more than a month ago, we also had the Jameis Winston who beat the Ravens and threw 3 touchdowns and no picks. So I don't know. I mean, again, it just depends on like what Jameis Winston are you going to get. But I do think that he's, again, still the most entertaining quarterback in the league, because like obviously you watch him play and it's fun, but just his personality, as a person, is hilarious. It
brings a smile to my face. So like all his like speeches before
he was hyping him up before that Denver game.
Well, and I think that kind of peeling it back just a little bit, I love the fact that this is also where Jameis Winston is in his career. Because, remember when he was starting out, coming from Florida State, there was so much of those allegations when he was at Florida State. And then he, and then, there was some stuff that was going on with Tampa. It was obviously the first quarterback to have not the 30 for 30 documentary, but there probably should be a 30 for 30 documentary on it. When he had the 30 for 30 year, right? 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions.
Yeah.
But like
that was before he got the LASIK, right?
Right. But what's so funny about that is the 30 for 30 was a nice little appetizer for what his career was going to end up being. But I just think that overall, like what he's been able to mold himself into as a person, as a player, it's just great. It is great for the league, because I think that like having a character like that is really good for the NFL. It's good for the exposure. And I do think it's like, because like, we say so often about, like, a bad teammate, a good teammate. There's no doubt in my mind that Jameis Winston is not a bad teammate, right? Like, he is a good teammate. Like, he is going to be there fighting, to the very end for his teammates. And that's exactly what you want out of a quarterback.
Yeah. So good for him. I mean, we'll talk about the Jerry Jeudy stuff, but
well, do you want to just, let's
just get into it. I mean, that was that was a hell of a homecoming. I will say, I do believe that was kind of the perfect marriage between them having Jameis, Jerry Jeudy being very
explosive,
motivated,
yeah,
and also being covered by Levi Wallace. I mean, we missed
we missed Riley Moss.
The depth of the secondary without Riley Moss scares the hell out of me.
Yeah. Which is crazy because obviously, Riley Moss is not a rookie, but it sounds kind of crazy to say that, here's this defense and just the impact that a rookie.
He got benched for Chris Abrams-Drain, I'm sorry, I'm talking about Levi Wallace, got benched for Chris Abrams-Drain.
Well, he got benched with like 4 or 5 minutes left of the game.
And Chris Abrams-Drain is a rookie, is what I'm saying. So you got a veteran guy who's benched for a rookie. Like, that's not great.
But it just should have happened sooner.
It shows you how much Levi Wallace is a liability, and it shows you how much Riley Moss is a gigantic piece of the secondary.
Well, and from the Jerry Jeudy side,
and
from the Jeudy side, I was just gonna say, like, it felt like a nice microcosm or view, if you will. That's probably the best way. View of who Jeudy is.
Yeah.
Look, and everybody knows that I had been, when he was with the Broncos, a bit of a pro Jeudy guy. But I will say, like, we didn't get a chance to see that particular flamboyant side, in terms of, like, for a full game. But then he leaves and he starts kind of spouting off a little bit more, and you really start to see what was kind of like boiled deep down underneath. But then you also see the talent on the field, right? And so, I mean, kudos to him. He had a phenomenal game. Jordan Lopez, if you're listening, you got your wish, buddy. You had your beautiful Jerry Jeudy game. And
it just was against Denver.
It was against Denver, and also Denver got the win. But it was just it was a true identity of who Jeudy is as a player and as a person. And
it is.
Yeah. And
also just like all the stuff about, I don't know, wide receivers are divas, but Jeudy, and I wish nothing but the best for him. I think he's a great player. But Jeudy being in Denver and having all the cryptic tweets and then coming back to Denver and obviously his pregame quote and then him doing that let me hear it kind of thing. I mean, I get it, but I'm also like, if he had held out a little bit more and didn't request that trade, Jerry Jeudy with Bo Nix, that's the perfect marriage. You got a guy who's on time with the football and a guy who can get open and be exactly where you need him to be with his route running. Would work perfectly.
And that's what we've said.
Jerry didn't have a great time in Denver, but it wasn't that we ostracized him. He also had his struggles
early on in the year. Yeah.
In his career.
Yeah.
In Denver. But I digress. Anyway, amazing game by him. It's funny. I feel like you've seen people talk about, you get him going against Pat Surtain again, which crazy throwback because they obviously both went to Alabama at the same time. But I think I've seen some incorrect analysis out there about Jeudy torched Surtain, and it's no, on the routes where he actually was being covered by Surtain are there pretty much the only times he wasn't making an impact on that game.
Right.
I don't really understand why we didn't do that more.
Yeah.
To be honest. And I get the, we don't want to give away the coverage and we don't want to have him constantly follow and indicate that we're in man or whatever, but it just like there's got to be something you can do. Because Levi Wallace was absolutely getting obliterated. They tried to give him some help. The other thing that just brings to mind, or that comes to mind when I think about and talk about what happened with Levi Wallace's performance in that game, you can't tell me Damari Mathis is worse. Like, is Damari Mathis in the grave? Not the doghouse, the grave. Like, what did he do? Did he like sleep with Vance Joseph's wife? Like, what happened? I'm kidding, but like, he must have done something egregious, because I don't know how you see that and not think.
And it's
maybe he's still injured. Maybe he still has some injuries. I don't know. He came off of IR in October, but it just kind of blows my mind.
It's just wild, because had the Denver Broncos not won that game, we are having a Vance Joseph conversation. So like, and so much so that like,
I mean, no, yes and no.
No, I think
I get it. I get it.
No, I think you are having a much more difficult Vance Joseph conversation that is, like, why didn't you make these adjustments? And obviously we're having that conversation somewhat now, but it's just like, why didn't you? Because like, that was at the epitome of it all, probably the reason why that game was close, why that game, frankly, didn't even have any need to be that close. If you made an adjustment as soon as you did, even after the first quarter, and put Pat Surtain solely on Jerry Jeudy, we're not talking about a 41-32 game. I mean, we're probably talking about a much tighter game, and you're also probably talking about a game where the Broncos maybe win a little bit more, like by double digits also. And I think that it goes to show you at times, I think that arrogance can also get you losses on a game schedule. And I think that Vance Joseph was just far too arrogant to not to allow this thing to progress and slide as far as it did. And look, I mean, I loved the idea to have Abram Strain active. What I didn't like was having him be moved with like 4 or 5 minutes left into the game, and you're making that, because like, we're talking, at that particular point, it was like almost like 32-31 or 34-32. Like, that's a pivotal moment in the game. Like, kudos to him. You're getting his feet wet and everything, but you're also throwing him into the fire in a really critical situation. So, and speaking of the adjustments, it's like, it's so frustrating, because, you just put in the last game, for a majority of the game, you put Pat Surtain on Brock Bowers, and he was neutralized for the entirety of that game, right? And so it's just like, I don't know where it went with Vance Joseph. Like, it was just, I think the arrogance just took over, and he just, for some reason, just never made that change to go to full time of what we all wanted, which was the PS2 and the Jerry Jeudy matchup.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Look, I'm not gonna. There were some people, I think, having an overreaction about specifically Vance Joseph, and just saying like that not that he wasn't potentially costing us the game. I mean, yes, but I think these same people were also like singing him praises for most of the year and saying like, I hope this guy stays. I hope he decides to be a defensive coordinator and not try to be a head coach again.
You're saying like he needs to be fired, or?
I didn't see people said he needs to be fired, but just like a lot of hate on. I think some people were like, we should need to have a conversation about him. I'm like, yes, one game that sucks, whatever. But like, that's an overreaction in my opinion. It was a really bad game. Yes. Also, we had a complete liability at corner out there, and we still won the game. So I don't know. I think it's easy to overreact to that stuff, and I think that, I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying I saw people that were saying things like, "Oh, it's time to have a conversation about Vance Joseph," and I'm like, it's one game.
Well, and I think that Lawrence really hits kind of a nail on the head, here, because that particular defensive performance,
Yeah.
was the worst performance we have seen under Peyton since Miami, and you won the game. But to what Lawrence was talking about there in terms of Peyton not letting it slide, you look at what happened after that Miami game and the rumors and the news was kind of percolating after that or starting from that, and that was, Sean challenged him, right? That's what they heard, or we heard, is that Sean challenged Vance. And, Joseph responded, and we went on that 5-game magical defensive run, right? That kind of carried us and vaulted us into playoff contention, only for us to not get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, yes, they won, but to Lawrence's point again, I wonder if there was a conversation had, at the very end of that. I would imagine so, because obviously coaches always talk, but I would imagine that Peyton got into Vance's ear and said, dude, we can't let that slide. We got the W. I'm thankful we got the W, but we have to be able to make adjustments quicker on the fly.
Oh, I definitely think that that's going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see what the adjustment we make going into. I mean, honestly, Anthony Richardson could go on a very similar career path to Jameis Winston in that he can. Let me rephrase that. There's a very small sample size. We haven't seen nearly enough, but I'm just saying, like, he seems to also have the knack for the big play and also throwing the interception. And like Anthony Richardson is borderline still a rookie because he's barely played in general football. But I just think the style, like stylistically, you're getting someone similar to like the guy that's not super, super accurate and is going to make some mistakes in Anthony Richardson, but is not as polished in the rest of his game as like Jameis is, because Jameis has obviously been around for years as a veteran. So I think you could see. Let me just say this: Riley Moss come back quick. Thankfully we have a bye week, and like I'm not saying I think that the we'll get into the Colts game likely next week, but I just think that it could potentially be an issue there because you have a quarterback with this skill set that kind of Jameis has, which he can make the big play, and he has some of the weapons to make the play. Although I think Josh Downs is going on IR. I saw something about him being injured. I don't know exactly what his injury is, but kind of one of their bigger receivers that is part of the deep threat for the Colts. But it's just interesting to see like how we're going to bounce back from this. And Riley Moss, please come back. But I agree. I don't think that's going to happen again. Like, I don't think Sean Payton will allow that to happen again. I don't think Vance Joseph will either. But it does just kind of, again, expose a little bit of the secondary depth. And I think that's something that maybe we weren't talking about looking at as much in the offseason. We've pretty much had all of the discussion on the offense, and rightly so. And I have I have an observation about this game as well that we'll get into that shows a different glaring hole. But I do think you could see more moves being made in the secondary, and you really can never have too many corners. And like, that's already a George Payton belief, but it's just I think you see what happens when you lose Riley Moss, and I'm like, you got to get some more depth there.
I think I have an idea where you were leaning, but I think that because I think that if you're talking about things that need to improve, we'll probably end up talking about that. But on that flip side of the coin, defensively, before we dive into the offense, defensively. They were able to generate 2 pick sixes. That's 14 points off of turnovers. And, that's a big deal. Obviously the Broncos, whenever they have been able to win the turnover battle, or be about even, they have won a lot of football games this year, to where it's the 8 games now. And I think that, obviously, Pat Surtain has very much asserted himself into the Defensive Player of the Year conversation, winning AFC Defensive Player of the Month. So congratulations to him. But there's another guy. There is another player, Brandon, who very quickly this particular year has really risen and becoming that defensive player of the year candidate, and that is Nick Bonito. Shout out to
absolutely, dude.
Shout out to Frankie Abbott. I said on 5280, but shout out to him. He had the clip out there about Bonito's interception. Go back and look at that play from the all 22 perspective. That play is incredible. I mean, I don't know how many pass rushers, obviously he has the youth on his side, but I don't know how many pass rushers with the speed and, the athleticism, if you will, to make a kind of play like that, that Bonito makes. Like, he basically takes away 2 throws before jumping the route that he does and taking it 71 yards for the pick 6. I mean, he was also like moving at such a fluid pace. Like, it was almost like you were looking at a defensive back, Brandon. Like, it was wild. And I think that, like, for all of us, like, it kind of took our breath away. Like, this guy is like legit.
Yeah. Oh, Nick Bonito it's actually also crazy to see how much he
George Payton, by the way,
reminds me of Von Miller in some senses, just in terms of his pass rush and like the array of moves that he has and his speed. We were talking about Brown, his speed. Yeah. And it's just crazy to me that we picked him with the pick we got from the Von Miller trade. That's insane.
Crazy to think about, insane.
Right? But no, Nick Bonito absolutely belongs in the defensive player of the year conversation. I mean, he's half a sack away from tying Trey Hendrickson for most in the league. And he was going off, and like, we haven't even seen as much in that Browns game. I mean, I feel like obviously there was kind of the injury going around, or the injury issue that Zach Allen was suffering with, but I feel like we haven't really seen the same Zach Allen that we were seeing before he became injured, and obviously he's maybe still just kind of like coming back from that. But Nick Bonito picked up the slack, man. You didn't need the interior pressure when you're just not able to stop one of the best pass rushers in the league. And it just feels so good to finally have a dominant pass rusher again. And we have 2 of them. Jonathan Cooper has 8 sacks. I feel like Jonathan Cooper lives in the shade.
I think he's got 9.
Does he have 9? I think he has 8. I'll check.
I mean, I think he has not, but still, he is kind of living now because of the performance of Bonito.
He's 8.
He's kind of living a little bit in the shadow of
in the shadow of Nick Bonito.
Yeah.
But we have amazing pass rush moving forward. A young pass rush.
Do you remember
I'm excited.
Do you remember what I told you before the season started? I think I don't know if I texted our Manely Broncos chat this, or if I just texted you this, but I think I said something to like, I have a feeling that the pass rush is just going to surprise us this year, and it's going to be better than people think. I didn't expect that or any of this to transpire, but I think that what needs to be recognized, and obviously it was more so to do with the secondary and not necessarily the defensive front. It was such a weird game because people always say sometimes like how a pass rush and a defensive line helps out a secondary, and they're not wrong. But I just think that like this was just one of those games where it's just like it really had no matter whether or not you got close to the quarterback or not. Like just plays were happening left and right due to the fact that Levi Wallace was really bad in coverage, or some of the other corners were just really bad in coverage, and Jerry Jeudy was roaming free, or Elijah Moore was roaming free, or David Njoku was kind of getting passed a little bit and getting scores. So it was a really weird game in that regard. So that's kind of a separate point. But like what I was going with is that like from the Bonito side and Cooper side, it's like you also have to appreciate like what's been happening in the middle. So like everything that in terms of pressures and everything that's been happening from the interior, I mean, it's creating so much now where Nick Bonito may not necessarily see as many double teams as a Zach Allen, right? Or it's going to force teams that because of what's been happening to Nick Bonito. Frankly, there was a moment where I don't think he had a sack, or maybe it was the play he had a sack. It looked like they chipped Bonito, almost double teamed Bonito, and he was able to still get to the quarterback. So I think that like that's just the other angle inside of it with Benito and even Cooper, that when you have two just pure relentless pass rushers that are getting better year after year, that is such a dominant combination. Like
Yeah,
it's all like it's
absolutely.
almost, like I made the comparison, was it like a couple weeks ago, that I felt like maybe like Trey Hendrickson, like the Broncos actually had their own Trey Hendrickson, and it was Jonathan Cooper. And then to what you talked about earlier, which was seeing some Von Miller. So it's almost like you're seeing Von Miller and Trey Hendrickson on the same team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other thing too that just was pounded in my head in that game, unfortunately on the offensive side of the ball, is like we do not have a running game.
No. Well, we don't. However, due to the fact of the game and how well he played, he deserves a lot of credit.
I will give Jaleel McLaughlin credit, 100%. But I'm sticking with what I said, because Jaleel McLaughlin is not the kind of back that you can give 20 carries to. Like,
but have we seen it?
Not really. I mean, I just don't think given his size that is the smart play. I think he's a great third down back. I think he's a great back. I think we should certainly use him. But I just don't think we have a good starting running back on this roster currently. And I'm just going to be honest. Like, if we could get that going, this offense would hit a whole new gear. Like, I just feel like every single time I see us try to run the ball, it's like negative player stuff for 0 yards. I think it was like half of our rushes, outside of what we gave to Jaleel McLaughlin in that game, were either negative or 0 yards.
Williams.
What's that?
And that was Javonte Williams.
There's Javonte Williams.
Well,
Audric Estime has just been, who knows?
Well, there's a crazy stat that said like 24 carries for Javonte lately, and he's got like 1 yard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just unacceptable.
Well, it's over the past 3 games. He has. Let me just confirm this.
But
I think it's like. Let's see. Okay, I guess it's if you take out the Falcons game, which, I mean, yes, that happened. But take that game out, the last 3 games, he has 13 carries for 0 yards. Exactly. Because he had 8 carries for negative 2 yards against the Raiders. I'm sorry, Devontae he doesn't have it. He just doesn't have it anymore.
Well, and I mean, you'll probably use him on pass pros and
yeah, great pass pro back, but you can get another one in the draft,
and stuff like that. But I have to give a shout out to Big Mike, because he and I were having this conversation earlier about Jaleel McLaughlin, and so like I get what you're saying, and I think that I originally was thinking like, hey, I don't know if he is the type of back that could handle 15 to 20 carries. And I think that size-wise, and frame-wise, I can very much understand why we would all think that, like, I don't know if he can handle, the 15, or I should say maybe even the 20 carries, to be a running back one. But I will say this though, like, we can't necessarily make that assertion if it's never happened. You know what I mean? Like, so.
Well, you're right. And let me clarify that. I am not saying that. I don't think I worded that correctly. I'm not saying he can't do it.
Right.
I don't think it's the best use of him. I just don't think. I think that's not the smartest decision. Could he absolutely handle that amount of usage? Sure. He had 14 carries in that game and he seemed to be fine, but you can't do it every game. I mean, again, could you? Sure. Okay. Let me just explain it this way. I don't think the wisest option is to use Jaleel McLaughlin as your starting bell cow running back. I think he's an amazing change of pace back. I think he could be a great back out of the backfield. I think we should absolutely keep him on this team, and he's a great weapon.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that he is the kind of player that it is safe for his health even to use in that way. I'm not even going to say he can't do it because I don't know.
Yeah.
He's very talented. Maybe he could. I just don't think that would be sustainable.
I will say he's somewhat changing the narrative a little bit to where, myself included a little bit, said that I don't know if Jaleel McLaughlin is going to be like a Kamara type of running back in the sense that, plays out of the backfield, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, to anybody that has actually been out there and actually said, that Jaleel is a Kamara type of player that could be used in Sean Payton's offense, I might be wrong here because like the way that they're utilizing him, it's almost like a college play. I think it's like, it's not necessarily a screenplay to a degree, but you might as well call it a screenplay. But it's like literally a designed play to the running back where they just toss it out of the backfield,
Mm-hmm.
and you got like the wide receivers blocking and so on and so forth. So like those types of plays with Jaleel, if set up perfectly, are great plays for him. Maybe even Marvin Mims to a degree as well, right? So I just think that like there are certain positions and plays that I think that you can use him in that kind of Kamara set, right? So I think he's kind of shifting and moving away to maybe that narrative where you might be able to see that because specifically like this part of the year and in this season there are a handful of touchdowns or a few touchdowns that he had where it was almost a Kamara type touchdown. Like, he's literally the only person and he's got to like evade numerous people, maintain balance and get into the end zone. Like the Tampa Bay game, he did that. And then, oh gosh, there was the other one. I don't know if it was the Raiders game or what, but like there was a second touchdown in there that was again, super impressive. So I just think that there's ways he can do it. I'm not saying he's Philip Lindsay, because I think he's actually better than Philip Lindsay. But I just think that, there's certain ways where it can go. I think that until we actually see it unfold, where he can, and I will say this, due to the hot hand and due to how he's unfolding so far right now in the season, I don't think you have a choice but to roll with your hot hand. And
absolutely.
So I think that, so I will say that as much as we talk about this, I think over the course of maybe like this next handful of games, like Indianapolis, we might actually see the opportunities where Jaleel might get a 15, 20 carry game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I think he's a fantastic running back. I think he's a fantastic third down running back specifically. I think he's great out of the backfield. I just don't think it's the term I found that I like here is I don't think it would be sustainable to try to use him as your starting running back that you're giving that amount of carries to every single week. Let me frame it this way. I'm not even going to say I don't think he can do this, but would you give him 250 carries on the year?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
See, that's more what I mean. I mean, like, I'm not saying he can't take 20 carries in a game. Sure. I'm saying you can't. I don't think he could take, again, I'm not going to say he can't do it. I don't think it's a good idea to try to give him 20 carries a game every game and use him as that kind of back. That's all I'm saying. And really just the whole point of this, I don't know why I kind of turned this into unintentionally more discussion on Jaleel, but I just, our running game
it's just
in trouble. It's just not where it needs to be, and it needs to be a big focus point of this team in the offseason.
Well, and I think that going forward, like
I think it will be, but yeah.
Well, and I will say, like, these next games and going into the postseason, maybe that's going to be the audition tape. We say that all the time. Maybe not audition tape, but just like, by the time we think that someone's going to be given the hot hand, they don't. They revert back to Javonte or they give it to Estime. So, I mean, like, I'm not ruling anything out, and because like Peyton has kind of said one thing and done another. So as much as we talk about, Jaleel maybe being that hot hand and rolling with him, it seems like the opposite has happened. So, but I will say, I think this is a really good point where over these next few games, it would be great to up the ante and him, getting those carries and being a little bit more effective. Because if it doesn't work out, the idea, and not to dive too much into our need things to improve, but it would certainly be very beneficial for them to go find that running back. And we all know that in the running back class this year for the draft, there is a plethora of running backs that they can.
This is a great running back class.
So,
and you know what the other thing is that just stuck out to me like a sore thumb in this game? If you put I'm not even going to word it this way. If this team hits on a tight end in this next draft, and even if they're a top 8 tight end in the league, I'm not even saying it's the next Brock Bowers
or top 12
or Travis Kelce.
Like
put a good tight end on this roster, and it will feed families.
Yeah. So okay,
I can't even explain how badly I want that. It's just non-existent. It's non-existent. And you know what makes it funnier? We're about to play some teams that cannot stop the tight end. You want to talk about that Bengals shootout against borderline MVP candidate Joe Burrow, even though that team is struggling because like their defense is absolutely atrocious, and they're like, are they 4-8? Do they win?
They have 4 games. Yes.
Are they 4-8 right now though?
They're 4-8 or 5.
I'm gonna double check this.
I think they're 4. Yeah, they have 4 wins. They're 4-8.
They're 4-8. Woof. Joe Burrow is playing out of his mind, and that defense is so bad they literally cannot stop a single person. They can't stop anyone, but they absolutely can't stop tight ends. They're like the second worst team in the league against tight ends. Nate Atkins might get another touchdown in that game. So give me literally just so many tight ends in this class. Please take 1, take 2. I don't care. Take a ton. Literally, if we don't come out of this next draft, and I know this is months away, we don't come out of this next draft with a running back, a tight end, and a wide receiver, we're in trouble.
It's
a great class for all 3 of those positions,
who happen to be one of our 3 greatest weaknesses.
And all 3 of those are some of our biggest holes on this roster. But just it would feed families.
I like the appetizer probably to talk about what needs to improve, obviously, because I know we're going to talk about that more. But the offensive side of the ball, though, I think the one area where it has just been, we talk about how well, Bo Nix has been playing, over the course of these these mini games, right? What I really, really like is that, it really felt like, you certainly don't want your players or, even your quarterbacks reading their press clippings, but it really feels like Bo Nix has been kind of reading a little bit in terms of, what people have been saying about him in the sense of check down merchant, or he's a screen merchant, or, stuff like that. Because the last couple weeks, over the last handful of weeks, he's big game hunting right now, Brandon. Like, I mean, and he's been.
That was the best throw I've ever seen from a Broncos quarterback in 10 years.
You could also argue maybe one of the best throws we've seen at any point.
Probably.
I mean, so, and certainly maybe the best throw we've seen all season from any quarterback. I mean, the people that I've seen that were at that game and either sitting on that side or, where I sit, which is like section 135, like right next to the scoreboard, like to see that kind of view and to see just the accuracy, in throwing an absolute piss missile, to Marvin Mims. And, I didn't get a chance to say this on 5280, but I thought that this was pretty crazy. So the 93-yard play that Bo Nix had to Marvin Mims, right, was the first 90-yard play that I think that the Broncos had since Drew Lock's play to Jerry Jeudy against the Oakland Raiders, or the Vegas Raiders at that point in time, who happened to be on the sidelines for that play of the Bo Nix to Marvin Mims play, Jerry Jeudy. And it just so happens that in the offseason, Sean Payton said that Marvin Mims would be the one that would probably be taking Jerry Jeudy's spot. I just kind of found that interesting.
Well, I think, wasn't that also tied for like the 11th longest touchdown ever in Broncos history? something like that.
Yeah.
But just absolute seam. And I feel like you watch it full speed and you watch like, especially this is what's funny to me. You watch people that post a screenshot of like the very, very last point of the pass where you can kind of see that the defender's trying to make a play on the ball. And it's just basically going right into the bucket for Marvin Mims. And just people say things like, oh, well, that's lucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they understand that it wasn't luck. The ball placement on that was so good. That defender literally dives to try to make a play on that ball and still can't get there. That's what that screenshot is referencing. That's not saying like, oh, well, it just got lucky. It just like didn't happen to hit the defender in the hands. No, that defender was literally diving for the ball and it was still out of his reach. And that was on purpose. That's where you put the ball. When you're a pro NFL quarterback, that's where you're supposed to place that ball. And that's what he did.
For perspective, I don't know. I just had kind of thought, I think schematically it was a little bit of a different play. But when you go back and you look at the play that when the Broncos were playing the Texans, and Russell Wilson had that play to Cortland Sutton, and Derek Stingley jumps over Cortland Sutton and intercepts the ball, almost doing exactly what Denzel Ward was doing, and Stingley picks it off. If you go and you look at I'll have to text it to you, Brandon.
I'm having trouble remembering this exact play.
But the play to Marvin Mims, just it looked like the play itself was almost identical to that. And it just goes to show you the game of inches, possibly, or just if you have just a little too much air on the ball, it's probably picked off. If that is not a frozen rope or thrown in 65 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour down the seam to Marvin Mims, that thing is not intercepted. So it goes to show you like the just overall like the game of inches of how that is actually like it impacts games is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, that was just a hell of a throw. And good for Bo. But like that was the throw of the night, clearly. That was the throw of the year. But I feel like he made some other really good plays in this game as well. Like Sean Payton, this is something I noticed Colin Cowherd talked about, but also I noticed this as well. Sean Payton trusts Bo Nix to allow him to throw out of the end zone that many times. That throw on the run, like basically running across the end zone, that throw to Cortland Sutton, first of all, was amazing. Crazy throw. But also to have the trust in the offensive line to not get a holding call in the end zone on that. Like, I know he's a rookie, but he's a veteran.
But it feels like you're not watching a rookie. That's what you're saying. Like, I just texted you the clip, Brandon. Yeah. And to that point, like the play before, where Troy Aikman decided to completely butcher.
I think Tim Patrick just got a touchdown.
Bo Nix, if you will, right? He was like completely butchered Bo Nix like the play before. But
saying he can't see the field and he
can't see the field. But like, he literally avoids sack and throws it to the dirt, where the running back is, almost avoiding an intentional grounding, right? So like that play doesn't happen. That Marvin Mims play doesn't happen if he doesn't throw the ball away the play before. And so like that goes to what we're saying. Like there's so much confidence that is now being exuded from Peyton into Bo Nix that like, I think that you're starting to kind of also see the playbook be a little bit more at the disposal now. Paul just mentioned that Tim Patrick just scored.
Yeah, I just watched it. Yeah, that's kind of funny. Also,
fake laugh hiding real pain.
The fact that we dropped or cut Josh Reynolds as well, which I kind of understand why, but
yeah.
Imagine Tim Patrick on this offense. Yeah. No, I think that was the right move, and good for Tim Patrick for also scoring that touchdown.
Fake laugh hiding real pain. That's our famous line. But like to what we're talking about, like I think another really good example of this was the Marvin Mims incredible play out of the backfield where, I mean, it was a tremendous design, from Sean Payton, but like for Bo to recognize that, like at the last possible second for him to, that was a great play. That was just such a great play against the Raiders, the wheel play that he had out of that. So it just goes to show you the exponential growth that he's been having this whole year.
Absolutely. Good for Marvin Mims as well. I know that was the throw of the night, but I feel like we were also just centimeters away from almost an even better throw. That throw by Bo running to the right towards the cornerback of the pylon of the end zone to Javonte.
Yeah.
Oh boy. If that was caught and it was so close.
Yeah.
That might have been better. It was close. It would have been close. I think the Mims still would have surpassed it, but that was a crazy throw.
So I don't mean to have too much of a rookie of the year conversation, which, by the way, I think it's going to be really tight. I think the offensive.
I do. And
can I ask you this? Because I have to give credit where credit is due, and that's the 850 KOA guys. And Edwards said this, and Ryan Edwards, by the way, is going to be on 5280 next week on Tuesday. By the way, so make sure you stay. Get excited for that. But he said, and it was actually a really, really good point. Brock Bowers did not win 3 straight Rookie of the Weeks in November. Mm-hmm. He won one Rookie of the Week, I believe it was. And then he wins, or no, it did depending on what it was. Bo might have won all of them, all the Rookie of the Weeks in November, but he wins Rookie of the Month.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me.
I don't know. I don't know.
And I'm not trying to disparage or to discount what Brock Bowers has done. He clearly has played at a top 5, even top 3 tight end level as a rookie so far this year. He's even proving why Brandon and I were really content with taking Brock Bowers, at 12 if he was available, if we didn't want to take, Bo Nix or a quarterback or whatever. Mm-hmm. I was just a bit surprised to see Bo not win Rookie of the Month again, and it was actually Brock Bowers who won Rookie of the Month, and it was like Bo who just completely dominated the Rookie of the Weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I just will say, Brock Bowers absolutely has been on a tear.
For sure.
I am terrified. We can't have another Travis Kelce in this division. Imagine if the Raiders had a good quarterback. Yeah. I am please, or get on a tight end this year, please,
or another weapon, if you will.
Oh man, it's terrifying. He's so good. He's actually so crazy. Good.
It's actually crazy to think about that they had.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Paul. We certainly appreciate you. I will say it's kind of surprising to talk about the Raiders. They had Devontae Adams at one point with Brock Bowers, and it couldn't even work. So I don't know if that's a Devontae Adams thing or if that's just a quarterback thing. If
that's a quarterback thing,
or if that's an Antonio Pierce thing, I don't know. Nonetheless, please just don't give the Raiders a young wide receiver and or a quarterback, please. Like, let's just kind of maintain where things are so we can just neutralize him for the time being.
Yeah.
But I
don't understand. I mean, I feel like there's maybe a little bit of weird recency bias with, he just had that 2 interception game, so we're not going to give it to him, even though that happened literally in December and has nothing to do with November. That might have played. So
I'm not the only one though. Like, if
weird role.
I shouldn't say I'm not the only one because the 850 KOA guys mentioned that, but it just feels weird. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if you take out obviously the game against the Browns, which happened in December, did not happen in November. Here's Bo's November stats. I mean, it also this might also be dragging it down a little bit. It also started with the game against the Ravens where he had no touchdowns in that one pick. But other than that, I mean, you're looking at 8 touchdowns, 1 pick in the month. So, which is actually, and this is just passing touchdowns. Let me actually pull up. He hasn't really had a rushing touchdown in a minute, but
he hasn't had rushing yards for the most part in a minute.
Yeah, which honestly, I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. But
okay, so he did have 2 rushing touchdowns in October. But what I was going to say was he had 8 and 1 in November. In October, where he did win Rookie of the Month, he had 7 and 1. 7 touchdowns, 1 pick. Although he did also have 2 rushing touchdowns. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm trying not to care because it's just a stupid.
No,
it's again, a dumb award, but.
But we're overly not trying to really care about it, but it's just like the more you talk about it, you just kind of find yourself like completely baffled and
That's a good question from Paul.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. I think Bo has just settled down. I think he doesn't feel the need to take off and run as much as he has before, and I think that's a good thing.
I agree. I think that it's also like it goes to show you to what we had the conversation with earlier about the confidence that he's got. And that would be, in the passing game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, when you look at, how he's been able to operate in the passing game, there overall hasn't really been a need for him to use his legs, which actually is going to really fit right in to just overall him possibly using his legs just a bit more, right? Because it's going to make him just that much more deadly. Because and I think that's where, again, like this is, I had a conversation with Gage about this, but it's just like Gage Madrid, and he and I mentioned to him, the Drew Brees comparison as far as a ceiling has been the best comparison for a ceiling for Bo entering the NFL and entering the point of his career in the NFL. That said, from what we've been seeing in the Atlanta game and the last couple of weeks here, I'm not seeing a Drew Brees type of quarterback. And it's a bit outlandish for me to say this on the air. But it's going to be recorded. It's probably going to be sent over to to this certain fan base. But the way that he's playing right now in the last couple of weeks is like Josh Allen. Like he's playing at such a crazy level of he's literally looking for the big play, if you will. But it's sometimes that big play has been the right play, which is not necessarily been the case in the last couple of weeks. It's either just been he's taken the best play. Right. He's taken sometimes the best play or the boring play, right, as Sean would call it. Well, right now he's always he like I said, he's going big game hunting, like the mobility outside the pocket, the way that he's been able to now maneuver and really get outside the pocket. So you're starting to kind of see him be experimental now in the pocket. So I'm not saying he's Josh Allen right now at this point. I'm just saying, like, with what I've seen in the last couple of weeks, it's like a completely different comparison to what I've been seeing from Drew Brees.
That's an interesting comparison. I mean, I could see that. I think he's doing a lot of making a lot of deep shots. Unfortunately, the other thing that comes along with that is younger Josh Allen, which is like the bad interceptions that also come deep. And I know Sean Payton took the fall for that one in terms of that being a questionable call. And I agree. Like, I do think that was just a weird call. That was a pretty bad pick. The first pick was absolutely not Bo's fault at all. But I do actually, honestly, I see the Drew Brees comparison personally, because I just think he's a more athletic Drew Brees, because Brees didn't run as much. Literally, exactly. Paul's saying Bo is taller and a better runner. I think it's just like more athletic Drew Brees, which ironically could be Josh Allen, but Josh Allen just doesn't throw.
Right.
He's gotten better at it, a lot better at it than when he was a rookie specifically. He doesn't throw as many of the things underneath.
It's just,
I mean, I don't think it's a bad comparison. I mean, I think obviously and Bo's not having as much of an arm talent, like Bo not having the arm talent, first of all, is just like wildly inaccurate and just completely false.
Yeah.
He doesn't have Josh Allen's arm. Let me just say this. Like, it's not even close. Josh Allen is the best arm in the league. But, I mean, Bo has plenty of velocity. I mean, obviously, look at that pass to Mims. There was also another, like, it was a pretty short play. It wasn't like anything crazy to Lucas Kroll. Dude, absolutely put that in there with some cayenne pepper and mustard on it.
Brett Coleman called it a trebuchet with an arm. Like,
yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. It's the thought that's been in my brain. I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying he is Josh Allen. I'm just saying that the last couple of weeks or a handful of weeks of what I've seen, and obviously the game itself against Cleveland, that wasn't your typical Bo Nix game that, you know, for a lot of people that were used. Frankly, speaking of his arm, it shut up a lot of narratives in terms of the way that he is, in terms of his arm strength and everything. So,
yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about, by the way, because we should probably move away from Bo Nix.
No.
Bo Nix, God bless Bo Nix. Let's talk about him all the time. This is a nice transition to let's kind of also like talk about the bye week, where things should need to improve, that sort of thing. I mentioned on Twitter, and also you guys can find this over on X and Twitter. I did tweet out that, like, what has been the best part about this Denver Broncos season up to this point in the bye week, not named Bo Nix, because we all know it was all about Bo Nix's development. It was all about him as a quarterback. Can he be the guy? I think it's pretty evident.
Yeah.
So I think for me, and I did say it was Nick Bonito in terms of like the best thing that I've seen so far this year. I'm going to go a little bit on a separate point and bring up something else. I'm going to say Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton, week after week, he's just, it's like he's jumped in a DeLorean and he's back to his 2019 self for a consistent period of time. Now, we've had this we've had this conversation, you know, quite a bit with Courtland. Either it's been you know, in the off season, Brandon, or you know, or even should we say you know, at the midway point of the season, or really at any point in the season, Courtland Sutton, I don't know if it is a wide receiver one, but currently so far this year, he is in fact a wide receiver one. And the more he operates week after week, he's actually making it even more difficult. And this is quite a statement to say, but like, he's making it even more difficult for the Broncos to be like, you know what, let's go spend an X amount of money on a guy like a T. Higgins or a Chris Godwin in free agency, because the way that Sutton is performing, he is very much, to Paul's question, he is very much deserving of a contract extension. And frankly, I would even begin some of these talks in the bye week along with Garrett Bowles. But so much so that as this is progressing, Brandon, like, I don't know, as this thing is moving forward, that the best course of action is for them to spend all that money on a T. Higgins or a Chris Godwin, and meaning you kind of keep what you have here in terms of maybe your four players of Sutton, Vele, Franklin, and Mims, but you go to the draft and you get those young wide receivers that you can continue to groom with Bo, which seems to be a bit of a theme, which is one of the reasons why they cut Josh Reynolds. And you draft guys like an Emeka Ibuka, right? Or some Trey Harris, or, you know, possibly a Torrey Horton, or some of these just, those are just guys right off the cusp of, you know, what I'm saying. But so I just think more and more, as much as we talk about Bo Nix shutting up narratives, Garrett Bowles shutting up narratives, Courtland Sutton week after week is shutting up narratives left and right that he is not an elite wide receiver, that he is actually playing at such an elite level right now that I don't know if the Broncos might need a wide receiver one.
And Courtland Sutton is absolutely playing out of his mind. I think the biggest thing is, does he want to return? I still think you draft a wide receiver. I think you
I'm not saying you don't. It's more about like free agency for me.
Oh, that's sure. I mean, honestly, I'd rather draft one than even sign one in free agency, regardless of even if we keep Courtland Sutton, I'd rather do that. But yeah, Courtland Sutton is absolutely playing out of his mind. He has a connection with Bo Nix, and I mean, the crazy thing about Courtland Sutton is like he's so talented. He's had a connection or been able to build somewhat of a connection with every quarterback really that he's played with, even though he's played with some absolutely horrible ones.
Joe Flacco, Brandon Allen, Drew Lock.
Let's not say it. Stop.
Teddy Bridgewater.
I'm gonna kill you. Just kidding. I shouldn't joke about that. But he's absolutely just killing it. And like you can't, I think it's so difficult to build that kind of chemistry. You need to bring him back if you can. And it's
he is back here next year, by the way, for clarity. He is back here next. It's just about truly giving him maybe the pay raise.
Well,
looking for a little bit.
But does he want? I know, and I know he technically has one more year, but like, does he want to be here? Is my question.
I don't see how he wouldn't want to.
I know, but I'm just like, I don't know if he's gonna. Like, how does he view where this team is headed? I guess is the question.
My rebuttal to that would be, and it would be the same thing for Bulls. Like, does Bulls want to be here? Like, right. Dude, you and like Bulls and Sutton, like you literally have endured the worst possible situations of anybody on this team, arguably a few other people. Like, you don't see the vision of where things are going currently, finally, getting a quarterback, it seems. And Sutton, you actually getting appreciated and in top 10 categories statistically for wide receivers. Like, I don't know if it was me, I would be flabbergasted if Sutton would be like,
well, here's the thing. The other reason I ask, does he want to stay here, is yes, he's on the books next year. He is still under contract. I'm not saying he's a free agent, but he also carries a $20 million cap hit next year. And yes, we're going to have a lot of cap, but I feel like there's something is going to be happening there to get that down. Maybe if we give him an extension, we can move that money around and lower the cap hit next year and move it into some other years. And that's why I'm like, does he want to be here? Would he sign an extension? Mostly because of that $20 million cap hit.
So like, answer your own question. Do you think he?
If we get into the playoffs, yeah.
I think regardless, I think just the way that the season's been going, I think it's really hard for him to, actually we all owe him an apology. I feel like, myself, I owe him an apology because obviously before the season and him holding out and him, thinking that, he wasn't paid as what he was worth. Well, Cortland, you're in the top 10 of nearly every statistical category for wide receiver right now. Sure. And you are performing at a level that, frankly, I don't think any of us expected, in the sense that you're already on a trajectory to get your first 1,000-yard season since 2019. You are playing up to the level of what you feel like you should be earned.
Yeah. And look, I would pay him. Absolutely. I would absolutely pay him. And yeah, I hope he does want to stick around. I'm going to say that he does. But that's the biggest reason I'm asking that question is most like, can we give him an extension to kind of lower that cap hit and have even more money to play with? And I think keeping him also just gives you more freedom to do whatever you want in the offseason in terms of free agency and not have to try to focus so hard on receiver because, again, you already have that connection building. And I still would draft one. I would even still draft one in the first round, honestly.
I would draft two still.
Absolutely. But again, it's just so impressive to see what he's been doing. It's so impressive to see the connection that he's built with Bo as a rookie. Mm-hmm. And I just have one question. Are we ever going to see the Troy Franklin connection on the deep ball? I don't know. But I also think, speaking of connection, I think Tess Johnson is just, he's a Bronco, like already. Just put him in. Write him in. He's already a Bronco. Seriously. But
So
I would definitely re-sign Cortland, and I would still go after a wide receiver, absolutely, even in the first round.
So obviously, I answered my question in the sense of like, what's impressed me the most? Because I mean, like I said on X and Twitter, I said Nick Bonito was probably the most impressive. And obviously tonight on Manely, I said it was Cortland Sutton, which I felt was the most impressive. What do you feel is the most impressive? And again, for people that are in the comments and like Paul and others, the question is, and it's a full disclosure, what is the most impressive part of the Denver Broncos going into the bye week? That is not named Bo Nix, because that's a pretty given answer.
Yeah, the pass rush.
Pass rush. So
pass rush for me.
Yeah.
Nick Bonito specifically, but also Jonathan Cooper, just absolutely killing it. Absolutely killing it. And that was a big question mark. It's been a big question mark pretty much since Von Miller left, because even Bradley Chubb didn't really pan out in the way that Nick Bonito has panned out, honestly. And like, what is Bradley Chubb been up to for the Dolphins? Is he injured?
He's pretty quiet.
I know he had 11 sacks last year. He must be injured. But yeah, Nick Bonito absolutely killing it. Just killing it. I think Bradley Chubb had a good rookie year. I wasn't saying Bradley Chubb was a bust. Far from it. Great rookie year, but I do think he was also playing next to Von Miller. And I'm not trying to bash either one of those players. I love Bradley Chubb. I love Von Miller. Love. But I do think Nick Bonito gives us something we haven't had in a very long time. I think Jonathan Cooper helps. And the pass rush is the most impressive thing to me.
It's also homegrown. And I say that often.
And they're young. Nick Bonito's 25. Jonathan Cooper, I think, is also 25.
And by the way,
26.
And by the way, so the Broncos were able to extend Jonathan Cooper to a hometown discount, right? But in the way that Bonito is asserting himself, I don't think he's eligible for an extension now. But I think that next year,
but maybe after next year. Yeah.
But next year, you very much are going to be entertaining the idea of literally giving him the Batman type money, which is the over $20 million per year pass rush money. But also maybe if you're Bonito, I wonder if you take less, and kind of take it from your counterpart, Jonathan Cooper. But that would be the case where he's going to be maybe entertaining, close to $20 million a year in terms of pass rush money. But it's certainly a really fun, thing. But and I think that financially the Broncos, and this goes back to Bull, Sutton, etc. Contractually, the Broncos front office and financial team have really done a great job of working through this, and even Peyton too, getting every single person locked up as much as they can who have been rewarded and rewarding those types of players. They're setting it up now where, like, let's just say that they extend Sutton. You basically have just set it up now where you could franchise tag Bulls for $20+ million and sign him to a 3-year contract extension and basically add that onto it. So like you're setting it up perfectly financially for you for how you want to do business with both of those players.
I think it also just plays an important role in like also paying Nick Bonito the money that he'll absolutely deserve. But we've kind of already set this standard in Denver, which I think is fantastic. And that is we pay players that we believe in and that we draft and that we identify. And there's a lot of teams out there that do not do that. Specifically, one that comes to mind immediately is the Cowboys. Like, would you, if you were like, obviously you can't choose where you're being drafted, obviously. But if you are a free agent, you want to go to the team that rewards their players, like absolutely, I think that plays a big role in it. If you are being drafted by the Broncos, that just motivates you to play up to your potential because you're able to secure that money. And I'm not saying that there's professional football players that are phoning it in because of money, but I just think it just creates a culture and like just a locker room it can't hurt you. It can't hurt you. And I love that we're doing that. I think the other thing as well is like, this is going to be an attractive place for free agents to want to come to. We have the richest owner in sports. Like, they're going to be able to get paid. We're going to have a lot of cap money, and we have a quarterback, and we're on the up, and like, we're probably going to be a playoff team. So just the turnaround has been just incredible.
Yeah. And by the way,
Paul, I would honestly I would extend Zach Allen too.
Yeah, of course. By the way, Paul, you can't franchise Sutton because he's here next year. So it'd be about working a contract extension with Sutton. And then it would probably be deciding whether or not you want to franchise Bulls, franchise tag Bulls. So in terms of improvement, we touched briefly on it. We touched briefly in terms of the running game and some of the defensive side of things, right? I think if there's one position trending into the area, of where you might want to go big fish hunting in free agency. Look, I love the growth and the grooming that we've been seeing from PJ Locke, from Justin Simmons, and all the great safeties that were performing, playing really well. And I will say, though, unfortunately, it's not great right now so far this year. PJ Locke has been a little bit inconsistent. And I know he signed the 2-year deal. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if the Broncos made a strong decision and moved on from him. And why do I rephrase and why do I say it this way? Because I would actually go out into free agency and reunite Brandon Jones with his Miami safety teammate in Javon Holland. Spend a lot of money in free agency if you can, and bring Javon Holland here and have him work with Jim Leonard if he's not pried away for possibly a defensive coordinator job in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely Tim Patrick just scored another touchdown.
Let's go, Tim Patrick.
Holy crap, man. Good for Tim. I think it was Tim Patrick. This is an absolutely atrocious broadcast. It's just like, it looks like it's being shot on a potato. It was Tim Patrick. That's so cool, man. Good for Tim. Good for Tim. These are his first touchdowns since 2021.
Fake having real pain.
Good for Tim. Though.
Yeah, good for Tim.
No, I love that idea. I definitely think having again, the idea of like planning on keeping Sutton, and again, he's here next year, but I do think having this amount of cap money that we are going to have available also makes sense to try to spend more on the defense. And now that we finally have pass rush, that's not going to be like something we have to really worry about. And I think you can really work on the safety room and the secondary depth. If you can go get maybe Javon Holland, if you can go get, I actually don't know other safeties that are going to be a free agent next year. Let me take a look here.
I don't know. I know that
I would absolutely, my whole point of this, I would absolutely go after safety and free agency.
Yeah. I kind of felt like that's where you were leaning with earlier in the show. And so it's just like,
oh yeah, definitely.
And so, yeah, that's why I kind of was like, okay, we'll bring that up again. But I know that Hufanga from San Francisco is a free agent. He's such a wild card. I hate to use this comparison because it's the 49ers and the quarterback that was drafted. The quarterback that went there had just so many injury history for the longest time. Jason Verrett. I hope Hufanga does not end up being like the Jason Verrett, where he ends up having, a really good career for like 6 games a season with a team, but he just can't stay healthy.
Yeah. I mean, Justin Simmons is a free agent again.
I would not say no. I kid you not.
I wouldn't either. And I honestly don't think he would say no. Now that he would finally be on a winning team.
And a quarterback.
Because the Falcons, man, I feel bad for Justin Simmons. The Falcons are absolutely imploding. And they're still first in the NFC. That's just, in the NFC North. That is insane. And they're 500, but Kirk Cousins just threw 4 interceptions. They've lost 3 in a row.
you could actually argue that they should re-sign Justin and sign another guy, right? So,
definitely. I mean, Justin's 31.
So he also still lives in Colorado, for those wondering. Simmons still lives in Colorado, so he's still got family here. So yeah, he loves it here. Always will. Yeah, I think the other one, and this is the one we touched on, of course, earlier, and that would be the running back position. And we talk about it so often, in our segment, but it feels very much. I need to almost like bump the conversation up even more, Brandon, and that is like they've got to figure out what to do with the running back position. They've basically the Blake Watson thing is somewhat fascinating to me because they cut him, but they brought him back on the practice squad, so they clearly see something in him. Was this like just a redshirt year, and this was just about filling roster spots, and they're just fortunate enough to not lose him and bring him back to the practice squad? Well, no team has yet poached him yet from the practice squad, so it's just like, so his conundrum there is a bit fascinating. I'm not saying he's a world beater and like the next great running back in Denver and everything. I just think it's fascinating now that he's still here. What are the plans for him in Denver? And then just overall with the class, and we talk about it with this draft class so often. This class is just so loaded that you could, if you wanted to not have, I think it would just be really smart to draft a young, really durable running back if you can, and there's just so many to choose from. And maybe if it comes to that point, and George Payton decides to trade up for a North Carolina running back by the name of Omarion Hampton, I think we have an idea that he's fallen in love with something in the North Carolina waters, over there. But that said, Omarion Hampton is a really good back. If you guys have not had a chance to, from what I've seen from a prospect wise, but let's talk a little bit about some of that draft class, some running backs that kind of.
That's funny because I was actually going to bring up Omarion Hampton.
But yeah, he's interesting.
He's interesting. He's 6'1", 220 plus pounds. I actually don't know exactly how big he is, but I know he's like definitely over 220. But he also has speed. Like it's just like a really interesting combination that you don't usually see with guys that are that big, is also have that ability. I mean, like he's not a absolute barn burner, right? But he has pretty crazy speed for the size that he has, and that's always a winning combination. I mean, look at now that Christian McCaffrey, unfortunately, is out for the year. We're going to see the size and speed combination in full swing in Isaac Guerrero in San Francisco and that rushing attack, because he had one of the craziest athletic testings of any running back ever. Actually, I'm kind of curious to go find his Ross because I know it's insane. But yeah, Omarion Hampton is another one of those guys that you can grab that you don't have to take in the first round. I mean, obviously, the kid from Boise State's always going to be the running back that is going to be at the top of the list. But you're going to have to take him high. If you don't have the luxury to be able to do that, and most teams outside of the Lions in recent memory when they took Jahmyr Gibbs, and then the Cowboys because Jerry Jones is Jerry Jones, don't have the luxury of taking a running back in the first round. Like Omarion Hampton's another guy that you can take a bit later that's going to give you a lot of the same production. And yes, Ashton Genty is one of one, but Omarion Hampton is also a very good running back. Like there's so many good running backs. Isaac Guerrero at a 9.97 out of 10. Ridiculous. I'm not saying Omarion Hampton is that crazy in terms of that size and speed combo, but for as big as he is, he's also pretty quick.
I will say, when you look at from the draft class side of things, if Ashton Genty was not having a Heisman type of season, or really just the overall workload type of season that he's having, I think a lot of people would be talking about Caleb Johnson. and what it and
You know how much I like Caleb Johnson.
right. And so a lot of people I think would be aboard the Caleb Johnson train because, like, here's a guy where you look at Iowa in general, and he's the entirety of the Iowa offense, and I think it's so interesting because the Iowa teams they're always predicated off of tight end, right? Tight end and really good offensive linemen, and they have what is it? They have really good offensive line play, and they just never really have had stable running backs to where they're just like dominant running backs. I think they've had some good running backs, like Tyler Goodson. I think is still in the NFL and he plays with the Indianapolis Colts or something. But he's in the NFL right now, and he's a pretty nice little scat back, right? For what he's kind of created for himself in the NFL. But Caleb Johnson, I mean, like, we're talking about a guy, that does legitimately have 3-down running back potential, and a true workhorse. The only problem, and you can call it the Monte Ball, Royce Freeman PTSD, being a Bronco fan, but it always worries me, when you see a back that has that amount of workload and excuse me, and tread on his tires. Where it's like, what will it be in store for the NFL? And maybe they draft him, they draft Caleb Johnson, but then they use him in a bit of some intermittent situation, kind of split his carries a little bit, his rookie year with like a Julian McLaughlin or and so on and so forth. So I think that nonetheless, I just think that overall his fit is fantastic with Sean Payton. I think that he's great out of the backfield. His pass protection is stellar. I think there is a very real chance that a lot of people are going to be talking him possibly, over the course of this whole draft talk, of him kind of closing the gap just a little bit with Caleb Johnson. And not saying he's a first-round talent, but you can very easily get him at that boundary first round to the maybe even early second round.
Sure. That's an interesting name. I have a little bit of a new name at specifically tight end, because if you can't tell, the theme of this episode is Brandon wants a tight end on the Denver Broncos. You guys already know how much I absolutely love this tight end class. Colston Loveland is really good. I love Tyler Warren. I think Tyler Warren might be better than Colston Loveland, actually. But another name that I haven't really seen mentioned as much, but is also super good, is Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. Yep. Now, the thing with him is he really can only be used as a weapon. And I know we just had a guy named Greg Dulcich who had a similar profile. But, I mean, be a goldfish. He's just an absolute beast of a pass catcher. He's really more of a gigantic slot. Like, you really cannot use him as a blocker. He's just not big enough. He's just not good enough, honestly, as a blocker to be used that way. But if you're looking for the tight end that can catch and make plays in the offense, which we absolutely need, Harold Fannin Jr. is one of those guys. I mean, if you put him with a creative play caller like Sean Payton, who can figure out ways to use him, like, that's going to be an absolute nightmare. And no, he's not Jimmy Graham, who was 6'7", but Harold Fannin Jr. is a guy you can get a little bit later, probably still day 2, like round 2, round 3. Like, I don't think you're going to be able to wait that long, but he's a great weapon. Super, super reliable pass catcher. He doesn't really drop that many balls. He's a good route runner. He just can't block really at all.
Well, and I think that for tight ends, this feels like it's going to be a tight end PSA, and it's going to feel like I'm actually like supporting Greg Dulcich here too a little bit. I'm not, but when it comes to receiving threats at tight end, it all boils down to, are they willing enough to be a capable blocker? If they're willing to do that, and you're willing to coach them up and be that type of blocker, I think they're going to be something in the NFL. Greg Dulcich, was not willing enough to be that to be that type of player. Can Harold Fannin be that type of player where he's willing enough?
To be fair, Bowling Green doesn't really use him like that. So I'm not saying he can't. Well, I did say he can't. It's more of he doesn't have the size that you want to do that, but you can coach a guy to use for his technique. Yeah. I think he could be a blocker. They just also they don't use him that way, and he just hasn't. He's not shown that he can do it well, but again, he's in college. They're using him in a very specific way. Dude has 100 catches for 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. They're not using him as a blocker. But he's not shown that he can do it. But again, you're right. I think you can certainly coach a guy up, and if he's willing to do it, like Travis Kelce didn't really come in as a blocker, but he will be a willing.
He's not the best
blocker. He's not the best, but he'll go out there and put his body on the line and block someone.
He won't get penalties called either.
No. So I definitely think Harold Fannin is another name to watch.
I have
there's some good tight ends, man.
I have to throw a little bit 2 wrinkles in this, in terms of how much it would interest you. Jeff Bryan, we'll get to your chat there in a little bit. Obviously, you were on 5280 on Tuesday, so I think you heard me ask this, or the guys and I talked about this on 5280. So you already kind of have an idea. But Brandon, I'll ask you. This is the first question I'll ask you. How would you feel? Because I think that Sean Payton did this in New Orleans. How would you feel about converting Little Jordan Humphrey to be a tight end? Have him gain about 15 more pounds. Hopefully, the body, displacement and how in muscle and and everything is perfect and right for what it needs to be. But how would you feel about converting Little Jordan Humphrey to tight end? He's already an unbelievable blocker.
I don't know enough about what goes into that to say that I think that that's doable. I wouldn't hate it. I mean, I think he needs to honestly put on even more pounds than that, though. He needs to get kind of up there. Maybe he needs to get 20 pounds. But I wouldn't hate it. I mean, sure, they can do that. I'd still draft a tight end.
It's more the kind of you have to sit on. And then the second question. The Green Bay Packers are playing tonight. And one thing I did tweet, you guys can actually search this a while ago, was around the point in time of the NFL trade deadline. I said it was unfortunate that this player was injured, because I think that he would have been a phenomenal trade target for the Broncos. Now, heading forward into this offseason, I think that very much conversation, needs to be had again. So, Brandon, I ask you, say the Broncos don't draft a tight end, but say they get a bit of interest and they start asking teams about, some tight ends and everything. How would you feel about shipping off a draft pick to the Green Bay Packers for Luke Musgrave?
I wouldn't hate it. I'd rather use the draft pick on a rookie, but I wouldn't hate it. I think Luke Musgrave is an okay tight end. I think Tucker Kraft has absolutely made him kind of expendable for the Packers, because Tucker Kraft has really come on as a great tight end. Lucas Musgrave is not. I don't think he's
been banged up.
Yeah, I don't think he's a fantastic tight end. Would I say get him as a depth tight end? Sure. But I wouldn't give him much. And I'd still, even if we did that, I'd still draft the tight end. There's just such a good class.
The thing
and
is,
to have one on a rookie contract, just
the thing is,
give me both.
The thing is there, I feel like if you were to trade for Luke Musgrave, at that point, you would probably want to add maybe a replacement for Troutman, I'd imagine, right? Because Luke Musgrave, I almost said Lucas Musgrave. Luke Musgrave, is your receiving tight end, right? Like almost a pure receiving tight end.
Pretty much.
So, and also you do have the best player in the team, Lucas Kroll, as a, should I say, is exclusive rights free agent. What's up, Clayton? Thanks for joining us. We're actually getting ready to wrap up the show, but thank you so much
thanks for hopping in.
Still though, thank you so much for hopping in. You're always
Clayton, the myth, the man, the legend.
Yeah, the man, the myth, the legend, Clayton Huron himself. Which, by the way, Clayton might actually end up being one of the most optimistic Bronco fans we know, Brandon. We have to give him some huge credit. I can't remember exactly what his record was before the season, but he was pretty optimistic about the Denver Broncos. And I gotta say, so far this season, those Denver Broncos are looking really good to matching that record of yours there, Clayton. So I wouldn't.
Yeah, man. So yeah. Great prediction. I don't remember what was the official number.
I don't remember the exact. I think it was a little bit over 10. I can't.
I thought it was like 11.
Yeah. So it's definitely doable there, buddy.
You saw it coming. Yeah, it's certainly doable.
Yeah. Just real quick, as we are rounding some of the stuff out, Paul mentions keep Zach Wilson for more experience. I tell you, I think that's going to be probably one of the underrated storylines as we are the storylines as things unfold is what in terms of the off season, because I think that when you look at it just from that side of things, it's going to be like, I think that the true answer to it is how comfortable is Sean Payton with Zach Wilson?
Sure.
Or how comfortable and how confident is he in wanting to keep Zach? Because
here's my other question: is how comfortable and confident is Zach Wilson in Sean Payton's offense?
Well, for the brief, and I'm not talking whitey tighties. The brief period that Zach Wilson played in preseason, he looked really good.
Mm-hmm. He did.
So
he looked like he was having a borderline career resurgence a little bit.
So just for that side of things, he did look really comfortable and confident.
Yeah. I do think that he probably gives us the most upside if we needed to have a backup quarterback play. I wouldn't be surprised if we keep all three of them.
Yeah. So in a sneaky way, I mean, obviously it's the famous video that's been circling around from their families and the famous TikTok video that Izzy Bo's wife videoed, and that was like all of them.
The one where they're like answering.
Yeah, the
questions. Yeah, that was good. I just thought about that too.
Because it's funny because like that's the kind of stuff like I see that kind of stuff. It's like I just want to keep it together.
Yeah,
because like
they have a great chemistry,
and obviously Bronco fans, know this too well. But it's the John Elway and Gary Kubiak type of relationship, right? So it's like seeing those kinds of things and having those like be a thing that can last for a little bit. I don't know. I would love to see those kinds of things again.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I think having two backup running backs backup quarterbacks is a good thing. I wouldn't be surprised if we keep them both. They're both getting more comfortable with this team and this offense. Zach Wilson has still a pretty good skill set, or a pretty tantalizing skill set, I should say. Obviously, it's good skill set. And the Jets, as we've seen even this year with Aaron Rodgers and firing their coach, that didn't really make a huge difference at all. And just that whole franchise is an absolute dumpster fire. I'm sorry, play like a Jet.
So,
friend of the show, but I think Zach Wilson is also having fun finally, and I think he probably wants to stay. And I'd keep them both. So,
okay, to Jeff Bryan's point here, let's run through the teams here real quick, as much as we can.
We could, I guess, but go ahead.
But as much as the teams, just real quick. Raiders. I don't think the Raiders would. Well, the Raiders may ask, but with it being in division, I don't think the Broncos would be very willing to move him on, to a team in division and have him be the starter.
No, definitely not.
So that you can rule that out. Okay, I just laughed. I don't think the Jets or even Zach Wilson. The Jets might, but I don't think Zach Wilson, of all people, would entertain the idea of going back, back to
New York. No,
back to New York. Oh, that's right. He is definitely not under contract, so the Broncos would have to extend him.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I just think that, I don't
maybe
know.
Pittsburgh, depending on what they do with Russ. Although, I mean, I think they're going to keep. I think they're going to keep Russ.
I feel like it's still
Justin
an audition.
Fields.
Yeah, I still feel like it's a bit of an audition for who they want to keep.
He's doing pretty good.
How weird would that be, by the way? Russ has an unbelievable year. And then Tomlin just goes, I kind of like Justin Fields.
Yeah.
That would be even more.
I mean, good for Russ.
That would be funny.
But I do think it's funny how people absolutely just hate on him the whole time he's with Denver. He goes to Steelers and looks good. And everyone's like, oh, Russell Wilson's top 10 quarterback. I'm like, do you guys just hate Denver? Like, what is it? I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you guys so much for hopping into the chat. This was absolutely great to be back on the airways with Manely, and obviously to get a chance to chat it up with Brandon and everybody. Make sure you hit the follow button for Manely Broncos at Manely Broncos over there on the X Twitter platform. Make sure you also follow both Brandon and I at Cameron Parker PO, at Brandon Miller PO. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already to the MHRT Network page over there on YouTube. You can also follow the show on Facebook at MHRT Network. You can also follow us on Twitch as well. So thank you guys so much. And we actually had a little bit of a change schedule-wise for next week. Brandon's going to be attending a concert on Wednesday, so we're going to be doing the exact same time and exact same day next week for Thursday. So we'll be doing a show again this upcoming Thursday, and then I think the week after that is when we'll go back to more of a regular scheduled programming, which will be Wednesdays at 7:30. But nonetheless, we probably won't be taking another week off here in quite some time. So cherish it. Again, thank you guys so much, and remember,
let's go Broncos! God bless Bo Nix.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my